That's it.
All right, it's 6:04. I'm gonna call the joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education to order.
Good evening, it is 6:04. Call the meeting to order for the Board of Education.
Okay. Our first item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. Menard, would you like to lead us, please?
To the flag.
All members of the Board of Selectmen are here and present. How about the Board of Ed?
We do have a couple people missing, but we've taken attendance. I think Betsy is out and Carrie may be joining. Grant's on.
You have a quorum,
Yes, we do have.
though. Okay. So before
I was gonna go to the meeting, but
Yes, of honor this evening, I'm gonna set the table a little bit just for folks who may not be aware of why we're here or how we got here. I think it was 2 years ago, the state rolled out a grant program.
that was the plan. And it was
Reimbursement
kind of
level for students in public schools. The town at that point in time had not done the study necessary to apply for the grant, so in order to correct that.
Put that nail on.
A second round of availability of those grant funds, we put together, or we appropriate the funds to engage consultants to do that. They're gonna talk to us a little bit tonight about what the findings of that were
Really?
disclosed or revealed, as well as what our next steps forward really needs to be, more holistically talking about all of our school buildings. And the company that we used, we have a history with in the town of East Windsor, CSG with their principal, Jim Giuliano, has worked with us on a couple of different projects and always done a very, very good job for us. We're very happy to have you back. If you'd like to introduce your team and then maybe dive a little bit about what you're finding.
Sure. So with me today is Samantha DiAgostino. She is the project manager that has been managing this project for East Windsor. Again, a little bit of the history, and we can't remember how much of the history we're going to get into here. And bringing QA&M on to do the assessment, the facilities assessment. But we were, I think sometime in March of last year, we hired, or we RFP for architectural services to do a facility study of all 3 schools in anticipation of the HVAC grant. When we did receive that study from the architectural firm, Samantha had reviewed that and had some concerns with moving forward with an HVAC grant, a successful HVAC grant, as a result, again, of some of the items that we found, such as windows, envelope deficiencies, roof deficiencies, which I think many of you are aware of, at least on the high school. And felt that it might be difficult to get an HVAC grant unless we take care of some of these items. As we looked further into it, we found there's still ADA deficiencies as well, which the state takes somewhat seriously and wants you to correct those. So before we looked into it, we said, we're not sure that this is a good idea to submit for an HVAC grant due to these deficiencies. So we took it another step and looked at different ways to address the issues. And as we look further into it, we've discovered a number of other items that need to be addressed, or at least be brought to your attention, so that way everybody is aware, the town of East Windsor is aware of what what the ramifications are of those, issues. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over, and I don't know if I stole some of your thunder, Samantha, but I'm gonna turn it over to you to kind of go through, the presentation.
I'm gonna stand up because I feel funny having my back to people. So hi everyone, my name is Sandra, I'm the project manager of CSG. And like Jim said, we were a holistic way to kind of improve the school piece further. Initially, like Jim said, it started off with doing an HVAC. In doing so, we needed to do the facility setup, and once we got that school did. So Jim kind of. So Jim kind of went through this, but like.
Yeah, I couldn't hear what she said.
They came back with the master plan. Other options, beyond just the HVAC system. So, okay, so this is just.
Yeah.
Assuming.
That's my.
Elementary, East Windsor Middle, East Windsor High School. These slides kind of just go over what your, their location, what their current square footage is. To the elementary school. So CSU is actually the elementary school project when there was a permanent additions or permanent. And then I also know, I believe it was in the middle school that roof replacement on, is that correct? So those are the three schools I just went through that. And then we'll get into the facilities. Okay. So what the facilities study being outside is each of the three schools and determine what some of the issues were concerning the schools. So the main issues with the elementary school, the windows due to and security concerns. Your exterior masonry walls have a lot of issues. And the areas of the roof that were used in that addition portion of the school also need to be replaced. So with an HVAC grant, the state is going to question why you would call the HVAC system. Your building envelope essentially is not secure. You're basically gonna put in air conditioning and the local air out. In addition to that, there's a lot of ADA issues associated with Broadbrook. Doors and the products with the school, that's a huge security concern. Your heating system, some of the systems are like the unit ventilators, the useful light based on this report. Air conditioning, some of your rooftop units are only about 10 years old, but a majority of the. So the idea would be fire protection was another big one, electrical, a lot of so they would need to be replaced. And hazmat, as far as we know, we don't have so that's just for the middle school next. And for the middle school specifically, they would complete replace. Again, I'm sorry. Not the middle school. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I got them. But window replacement is another big one. Your exterior foundation walls have a lot of issues that be addressed. Your site, your ADA signal. So that's another big issue. Yeah, same thing, doors and hardware, and then, similar air conditioning, electrical concerns as the elementary school. And there's. So again, looking at your school, school, your exterior foundation walls have your windows needed to be replaced. Same thing, heating, air conditioning, electrical, fire protection, all those things are major things. State is going to ask why. And frankly, your schools were built, in, the fifties and sixties, we use this. The schools were built in the fifties and sixties, so they are way beyond the 20-year lifespan. We typically see in towns, school districts, so they are ready to be replaced and ready to be updated. And that's what we're gonna get into next. So for enrollment versus buildings. So when we first started this, we strongly encouraged school districts to get involved with NESDEC, who is a company that will do enrollment projections. So if you go to the next slide. They actually had enrollment projections done in December of 2020. So this report is pretty up to date. And what it does is it uses birth rate data, and it takes it projects out, I think it's 10 years of what your enrollment will be based on the birth. So it fluctuates from year to year, but the reason why this is important is the state requires this as part of the submission. The state requires this as part of a submission, and what they do is they say, okay, over the next 10 years, what is going to be your highest enrollment at each of the schools? And based on that, there's a space standards worksheet that they utilize to calculate what your building square footage should be. So if you have, X number of students, you're only in X number of grades, you're only allowed a certain amount of square footage. And based on that, the state can, if you're over that square footage, the state will lower your reimbursement level potentially. Or they may say that you need to get a special waiver, which I'll get into in a little bit. So enrollment does play a huge part in this because it actually directly affects what the size of the school is and how much the town will be, what the town's cost for that, for the town share, cost for the town share. Okay, go to the next slide. So, currently, all three schools are extremely oversized for what it's. So, your elementary school, you're at an enrollment of about 480 students. Your current building size is a little over 69,000 square feet. If you use the current enrollment in the state space standard worksheet, the corrected size would be 67,200 square feet, which is not far off from what you guys currently have. The issue comes down to the middle school and the high school. So at the middle school, you have around 300 students enrolled. Your current square footage is a little over 83,000 square feet. Your corrected size based on the state standards is 52,500. So you're 30,000 square foot over what the state would consider an allowable square footage. For the high school, you're at currently 256 students. Your current building size is a little over 123,000. Based on your state standards, your high school should really only be 44,000 or 44,800 square feet. So you're extremely oversized at your high school for your current enrollment. And again, this is all based on the state's space standard worksheet. And it accounts for grade levels and it accounts for your enrollment projection. That's how they determine the square footage. So what we did was, if you want to go to the next slide. So what CSG did was we took a few different options and went to our estimator that we use and said, can you give us a square foot cost and some rough estimated cost of what it would be to either renovate a school in this condition and this and these sizes, or if we were to build a new school. So we came up with about 6 different options for you guys, and I know the numbers are gonna look a little bit high. But I just want everyone to keep in mind that these are estimates. And in lieu of doing just minor capital improvement projects, such as installing a new HVAC system, doing electrical upgrades, replacing the windows, replacing the roof. for relatively a similar price point, you can get brand new facilities. So I'm gonna, couple options and then, at the end, I'll have time for questions, so if anyone has any questions, feel free. So the first option is renovating as new and right sizing the buildings. This means, using the projected enrollment, so not including this school year, we took the highest enrollment for the next 10 years. Keeping all three schools, so you would keep your elementary school, your middle school, and your high school, but we would renovate them and basically right size them, meaning we would create or build the schools or renovate them in such a way that they would be the correct square footage based on the state standards. So, that means your, elementary school would drop about 2,000 square feet. Your middle school would drop around 28,000 square feet. Your high school would drop around 76,000 square feet. So highlighted in yellow is what the new size would be based on the state standards. And then if you jump to the next slide, we used those square foot numbers and we did an estimated cost of what it would be to renovate as new for each school. So the town of East Windsor has a reimbursement rate of 63.21% currently and 63.21%, I'm sorry, for renovate as new projects. And the reimbursement rate goes down to 53.21% for any new construction projects. So if you were to right size each building and renovate as new all three schools, the estimated project cost would be a little over 120 million. The state would reimburse an estimated amount of, I think it's 76 or 75.
Yeah, it's almost 70.
Yeah, almost 76 million. That means that the town of East Windsor would be responsible for about 44 million. And that means you would get, 3 brand new facilities. So if we jump to the next, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that, you know, it's, when we say brand new, this is a renovate as new, so it would be using the existing structure and bringing all the systems and, all the interior up to what the state considers a 20-year standard. So you still have the structure. And the other thing too is, when we're trying to right size a school, it may not come out to the exact, square foot, space standards that the state requires, but we can work with the state, in, understanding the attempt to right size the school, therefore maximizing, the reimbursement.
Okay, so jumping to the next option, option B would be to actually combine your middle school and high school. So what that would entail is actually using your current middle school, renovating it so it can function as both a middle school and a high school, which some towns in the state have been doing. The high school building would essentially get decommissioned and the town would have to figure out either they demo it and use it as a redevelopment opportunity or whatever they would want to do with it. And you would have 2 buildings, an elementary school, which would be renovated as new to the correct size that it should be. And then a new middle school, high school that would be utilizing the middle school structure and renovating that to, you know, whatever programming would be needed for the middle school and high school. So if we were to do that, if you go to the next slide, that would cost an estimated total amount of 93 million or almost 94 million for both schools. The estimated total reimbursement would be around 59,417,000. That means the town estimated share would be a little over 34 million. So that means instead of having 3 buildings, you would actually only end up having 2 in the district. Go to the next slide. So then option C is renovating as new based on your current enrollment and your current building size. So we wouldn't change the size of each of the buildings, we would keep them the same square footage. The caveat with this is because your buildings are oversized, the state will deduct a certain percentage off of your reimbursement rate. So if you go to the next slide, for the elementary school, instead of getting your full 63.21% reimbursement, you would actually get 61.49%. For the middle school, instead of getting the full 63.21, you would get 39.97% reimbursement. And then for the high school, instead of getting the 63.21, you would actually only get 22.9% reimbursement. And that's because the buildings would be considered oversized because of, due to your lower enrollment, and your larger building square footage. So in total, it would actually, end up costing 196 million roughly to do all three schools. And with, you know, the change in reimbursement rates, the town would only get 74 million or close to 78 million, but they would actually end up being responsible for 121 million. So they would be responsible for a larger share of the total project costs. And again, that's for keeping the buildings at the same size. Next slide. So, option D is similar to option B, in that we would combine, the middle school and the high school. But instead of using the middle school, we would actually use the high school building. So then the middle school building would get decommissioned and demoed, or the town could use it for another facility. Let me just say, I don't think I mentioned it for option B, 5th grade, instead of being at the middle school, would move to the elementary school. So your middle school, high school grade would be 6, 7, 8, and then 9 through 12, and then your elementary school would be pre-K to 5. And again, this would be to right size both of them and combine them, combine the middle and high school. And then if you go to the next slide, it would be almost 90 million to do both projects. Almost 57 million in total reimbursement with a town share of a little over 33 million. And that's again to combine the middle school, high school to the high school, and then move 5th grade to the elementary school. Next slide. So option E is new construction, so building 3 brand new schools. But doing it at the right size, so doing it at whatever the correct square footage is based on the Connecticut space standard. I just want to note with this one that your reimbursement rate, the state's reimbursement rate for new construction would go down to 53.21%. So if you go to the next slide, instead of getting the 63.21, it drops down 10% to 53. So in total, it would be almost 156 million to build 3 brand new schools. The estimated reimbursement is almost 83 million from the state, and the town would be responsible for close to 73 million. I think that was it for this one, yeah. And then option F is the miscellaneous upgrades. So this accounts for doing things like the HVAC grant, electrical upgrades, which the state will most likely not reimburse for electrical upgrades, a window replacement, and roof replacement in the schools where roof replacement is needed. So in total, it would be roughly $119 million just to do your miscellaneous upgrades, and you're only covering, you know, 5 or 6 items out of the laundry list of things that need to be addressed. And it would be, the state would reimburse at 63.21%, but we would have to apply like for the HVAC grant through the state, and the state's may question why you were gonna install an updated HVAC system when you have all these other issues like we stated at the beginning of the presentation. So if you go to the next slide. This is just a cost comparison of all 6 options that we had. So again, these are total costs for either all 3 schools, depending on, or both schools, depending on what option it is. And this is just a quick snapshot, so you could see, you know, how much it would cost to do certain things and what the state would be responsible for versus what the town would be responsible for. I just want to note on this that these are all estimated costs. They are no way or by no means final numbers. We would have to get into the design process and formal estimating and things like that to really get some more concrete numbers. These are based on, you know, the square foot numbers that I presented, based on current market conditions. So they are very rough. They could be higher, they could be lower, but these are just the numbers that we estimated for at this current point in time. Go to the next slide. So this slide, it's kind of small to see, but it's just pros and cons of each option. And it runs through a list, and I think we could probably distribute this or post it somewhere if needed, so you guys can actually read. I'm not gonna go through every single pro and con on the list. But like things for option A, pros, you get, 3 brand new facilities that meet the Connecticut state space standards. Actually. Other things that we had included up there, you get all the major issues addressed in all 3 buildings. Renovated schools could potentially increase your property value. And it could actually promote people wanting to move to the town of East Windsor and enrolling their kids in the school district because you have newer facilities. You would reduce operating and maintenance costs for option A because you're actually reducing the square foot area of each school. So less operating costs in terms of electricity, heating, cooling, less people that you would potentially need to maintain the building. A con is that you would utilize the existing structure for each building, which may impact the final square foot area, like Jim mentioned before, but that's something that can be worked out. For options, B and C, you would be addressing all of the major issues again, reducing operating costs and some for option B. And again, renovating schools increases property value. So again, I'm not gonna go through every single pro and con, they're kind of similar in some ways. Option F obviously has a lot more cons. You don't get a brand new facility at each school site. Your property value probably wouldn't increase if you're just doing minor capital repairs. It maintains the town's operating cost and budget for all 3 buildings, and the town actually may need to invest more money each year to fix certain issues that could arise beyond the scope of what's included in that option. So with that said, I know that was a ton of information and a lot of numbers. Does anyone have any questions? Or are people allowed to ask questions? I don't know.
So, begging the indulgence of the Board of Ed, I think maybe what we do is we table this agenda item and move on to public participation. And then come back to this discussion as a pair of boards. Because there are folks from the public here who may have some points that we ought to consider as part of our conversations. Is that amenable?
Yeah,
So could I have a motion to table agenda item 4?
Motion to table agenda item 4.
Is there a second?
second,
Any discussion? All in favor?
I.
Opposed?
Welcome to the table. Made the motion, Ryan seconded, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes.
So we're now on to agenda item 5, which is public participation. Typically, what happens with public participation is it's a one-way dialogue between the public to the relevant board. Because of the nature of tonight, I think we'll, if there are questions for CSG and they're able to either answer those on the spot or take those back and provide updates to the boards at a later time, I think we consider that. Is there anybody from the public who has any comments or questions on the proposal for CSG? Come right up, and if you could state your name and your address, and because of the nature of the room, use the microphone, that would be helpful.
Ed Szymanski, 166 Rockville Road, Windsor. I've been in town all my life. I appreciate the proposal you have here tonight and the information we provided.
Plus 20,
Couple
but I took
things I
another one,
was
so I think 25.
interested in the work presented, or maybe I missed it. One option that seemed logical would be merging the middle school and the high school. What would it cost for new that building versus renovate what you have? And 2, not just that, but whatever you do, if new is put in place, what's the actual cost for operating the facility? Because we know it's more efficient building goes on now than it did when all these buildings were put up. So I'm wondering, how much does it cost each year to operate a building, and would it go down by any significant amount if you had new construction versus putting in new windows and doing a new roof.
So for question one, we can actually go back and run those numbers for new construction for middle school and high school, and we can get back to you guys. Operating costs, I would probably defer to DPW maybe. I don't have what your current operating costs or facilities. That maybe I can connect with him and I can get an answer to your question. I just don't have those numbers off the top of my head right now, unfortunately.
Now, Raymond, Ten Eastwood Drive in town here. I just had a couple of thoughts that I was thinking about with this. The first was, how long would a project like this take as far as if we were going to combine the two schools? Is there a plan in place that we would be able to figure out, how the kids would be able to still get to school? And then the second one is that if you were to actually refurbish to go to, two schools into one position, is there any consideration as far as like when, we get the new facilities that kids, there's a draw to town and we get more kids. So if we downsize the schools to fit what we currently have, is there a plan in place to take into consideration new kids that may come to town?
So regarding the latter of your questions, in terms of new kids or new families coming to the town, we would have to do a comprehensive demographic study. Because that is a possibility, and in other demographic studies that we've done, where we're upgrading schools, especially schools that attend magnet schools, the demographic study does take into account for those children that would come back to a renovated school. I don't know what that is. We would again have to do a little bit more in-depth review than what the NESDEC enrollment study provides. But it is something that we would have to take a look at because that is a possibility.
Thank you.
Just to answer your first question, it was about keeping kids in school while building the school. Is that so we've done that in a multitude of projects. It is definitely not impossible. It's not easy. Just as an example, we just finished up a middle school in Enfield. It was 10 phases while occupied. And we completely renovated the whole school. It took around 3 years. They started, right when COVID started, actually, like mid-2020. And we actually were able to finish it up, like mid last year, so in the summer.
I'm sorry. It does increase the cost, and the reason that it increases the cost is because it slows construction down somewhat. So if we could combine both schools while renovating or building a new school, whatever the case may be, that expedites the construction process. So the faster we can get through construction, the less expensive the construction cost is.
Just to add to that too, in terms of phasing and swing space, because you guys have, so much extra square footage in your schools, there's definitely room to do, multiple phases, and you'll have room to kind of move kids around, shuffle, depending on what area of the building you're renovating. So it's definitely not impossible, just takes a little bit of planning and logistics.
Susan, 38 grade. So I guess this may be a question for Patrick, but how many classes do we currently have on people in high school? Because it just seems like a very significant reduction in square footage. And at the middle school, I don't feel that there's really that, like, where would we take the space from? I guess would be the question. And then my other question is this only structural, or does this include like fields, right? Because if we were to combine the middle school and high school, so the high school has a different set of fields for athletics than the middle school does. So there would that considered.
Sure, I can start. I mean, I Samantha, the overage thing. So Samantha and I have spoken, and we do not have one open classroom in middle school and elementary school, so I understand the projections and what they state, I would push and argue, that that's not the case. And that we would be stretched for space. There certainly is some extra space at the high school. It's not 80,000 square feet. But my understanding too, in my conversations with Samantha, there have been cases where you can work with your state legislators to get that space waived. So it sounds like it is a challenging but not still be.
And regarding the question about the fields, we did take a look at that and accounted for that in our estimate. Obviously, if we combined at the high school, we do have upgrading of the fields and the track, which would be less expensive than if we went to the middle school where we have to create the track and create the additional fields if we were going to combine them. And we did account for that in the estimate.
Was there a question on there?
Danny, are we gonna need to bring Mike to theater, maybe?
They said my question has been addressed. Does anyone else have any other questions?
This is Andrew Madison, 310 Rye Street.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I did have a question about fields and facilities. I teach at the high school and coach track and field, but there was hard to see on my screen. Somebody did address that issue. Is there enough space at the middle school site for a baseball field, a softball field, soccer, and a full track and field facility?
We haven't been able to analyze that yet, and we're not 100% sure, so we'd have to just go back and look and see what we would need to do in order to make that happen. So I don't have an answer for you right now, unfortunately.
46 versus 39 at the high school.
You had 46 acres to split middle school?
That's what your report says, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's.
Yeah.
It goes down. Yes. There's not 48 acres in flat.
That may be true, and you may have wetlands and things of that nature that we would have to, do further studies on to see. Obviously, if that was. I'm sorry. Obviously, if that was a consideration, we'd have to definitely take a look at environmental impacts and wetlands to see what could be utilized for, again, track and field, and as well as baseball fields and football fields and so on, soccer fields.
On 16 Church Street. I'm accurate over time projections. I was involved years ago that suddenly experienced tremendous growth. Nobody projected before. Also, it wasn't that long ago that we added trailers to the elementary school. And I lack a certain amount of confidence in cutting things to as closely and utilizing 10-year projections when even the 5-year projections have often proved not to be accurate.
And that's why I suggested a more comprehensive demographic study, because it does take into account building permits, it takes into account birth rates, things of that nature, that's a little bit more comprehensive than what you would get from Nesnet. For the most part, I think there's maybe 3 or 4 towns that I'm aware of in the state that actually have a population growth. Most of the population in the state, at least for school-age children, is decreasing, but that's why I recommended earlier that we have a more comprehensive, in-depth demographic study to take a look at that, and again, take into account the possibility of more people moving to the town as a result of improved schools.
Is there any other public comments? Is there any other public comment? Is there any other public comment? All right, then, we'll turn back to agenda item 4, which is questions and comments from, our respective boards. I have 2 that I'd like to lead off with. So in most of the options, not all of them, but in most of the options that you guys are presenting in terms of the renovated new, you talk about the state standards in terms of square footage. So to be crystal clear, if we were to opt for one of those, it would mean the state's expectation would be that we would take a facility that we have now, most likely the high school, and reduce its existing square footage.
Or we. By end of June.
But yes, the state.
Probably, yeah.
Here for people here.
Yes, so, you know, the state takes a strict approach at space standards. Now, that, again, as Samantha stated during the presentation, that there's always an option to appeal to the state and explain what the issue is. Also to appeal to your legislators, your representatives, to possibly get special legislation to waive what they call waive the space standards. If that happens, then you can utilize your full square foot area. But you know, again, you would want to take a look at that from an operations and cost standpoint from Town of East Windsor. I mean, it's you know, it's your choice as to you know, what you can do, but there are some options that we could explore.
So, first of all, before I ask a couple of questions, how likely is it that the state grants those space waivers? And if they grant those space waivers, do they grant them in their entirety, or do they, you know, so our high school is 120,000 square feet. They're saying it should be 46,000 square feet. So would they grant us up to 80,000 or the full 120,000?
It depends on what for the full 120,000. Obviously, in a situation like that, I think you're going to have to go with special legislation. I don't think DAS would grant that. They may. So, for instance, if let's just say we're going to go to the high school, and let's say we're going to attempt to right size the school, it would have to make sense. You know, we may not be able to get down to the exact square foot requirement from the state, but we're trying, and I think DAS would look at that as and say, okay, you know, it doesn't make sense to take this part of the building off. That's an extra 5,000, 10,000 square feet. We'll waive that because we do see a good faith effort in trying to come up with, or trying to get down to the space standards.
Could I piggyback on your question? Would getting that exemption jeopardize our 63% reimbursement?
No, that's why you get the exemption.
Yeah, you get the exemption in order to get the 63% rather than 50. If it's renovated as new.
If it's renovated as new, if it's a new school, again, you're automatically dropped down. And it's not just your town, it's every town. What they try to do is the state sees that or feels that utilizing the existing structure that you have is less expensive than building a brand new school.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah, so they incentivize towns by giving you a higher reimbursement rate to do a renovate as new rather than a new school, but in some instances that doesn't always work.
So in the instances or the options where you guys lay out right sizing our school buildings, in the cost of that, if we're renovating as new and right sizing the school buildings, in your cost, are you assuming that there is some sort of a deconstruction cost?
Yes.
What if there were a circumstance where we were to opt to renovate as new, part of a building and repurpose another part of it for some other non-educational use? Is that a viable option that's in there?
That could be an option, yes, that could, and we have to make that presentation to the state and say, you know, we're going to use 60,000 square feet for the high school and repurpose the other 60,000. The other 60,000 for community center or whatever the case may be.
So if you were to do that and you were to use it for a non-educational purpose, whatever you do to that area could potentially not be reimbursable because it's not for an educational reason.
That's totally in bounds. Based on the enrollment numbers you're showing for the high school, they're suggesting that the appropriate size high school for the town of East Windsor would be somewhere around 45,000 square feet. Is that 45,000 square feet of academic space, or is that inclusive of an auditorium, a gym, a cafeteria?
Inclusive of everything.
So my house sits on 1 acre of property, which is 43,650 square feet. I cannot fathom running a high school on my postage stamp acre, inclusive of a gymnasium and auditorium, even a gym and an auditorium, and a cafeteria, plus having to educate kids. So what is the state's assumption for a student ratio in each classroom at these schools? What are they assuming? 15, 18, 20, 25?
I'm not sure if it's based on, I don't know the number of students. I can tell you the square foot area per student for high school. I think it's 175 if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, if you pull that up, if you can, I believe it's 175 square feet per student, and that takes into account gymnasium, auditorium, cafeteria, things of that nature. But they don't, you know, because different districts have different class sizes, they don't base it on that. They don't base it on the number of students in a class.
And it is based on students per, it's a square footage per student, not a square footage per like fire code or occupant of the building. So that doesn't include faculty as well.
I'm sorry, I'm just looking at this. I'm sorry, Jason.
The 175 square feet per student is per student, not per occupant of the building. So it does not consider space necessary for.
That's correct. It's based off the enrollment. So just so you're aware, in your case, it depends on how big this, how many students you have. So 0 to 350 students in a high school, 9 through 12. The average is, what is that average? So for 9th grade, they give you 180 square feet per student. For 10th grade, 194, and 10 through 12 is 194 square feet per student. And then, but it reduces down as your enrollment increases. They figure an efficiency. So if your enrollment is 351 to 750, it reduces down for 9th grade to 176 square feet. And for 10 through 12, 190 square feet per student. And again, it reduces down slightly as you go, as your enrollment increases. So they figure an economy of scale. As you have more students, you can reduce the square foot per student.
Easy to transition. Takes up a decent amount of space, usually mandated requirement for special education. There's no special accommodations in this one, it's forced into both.
No, there's not. Again, that could be something that we could appeal to the state and say we need the additional square foot area as a result. But then it would be up to the state to make that determination.
I know. Instead, as far as projections, you know, like as far as their success rate, as far as how accurate they are, as like other school districts have, or towns have utilized those projections, have they been successful? Or is it a bit of doubt?
It's hard to say with NASDAQ. There are a number of other demographers. NASDAQ is kind of like a quick snapshot. There are other demographers that really take a more in-depth look, that are fairly accurate, in their determination as far as enrollment, at least from what we've experienced anyway. I know there's situations where enrollment may have increased with, unexpectedly, so those things do happen. But it's from what we've seen, again, Connecticut, is not a state that's growing. Quite honestly, throughout the US, there's not a lot of, there's not a big population growth. It's either staying steady or dropping slightly. There are certain towns in Connecticut that have had a boost, but not many.
So as an example, South Windsor just built all new elementary schools, and one of their elementary schools really needs additional classroom space. Can we find out what they used so that we don't estimate doing it that way? Because certainly it's a popular area, very good schools there, but we are going to be popular if we have good schools, so we don't want to make that kind of mistake.
Right, and I think, again, we'd have to work with the demographer to take a close look at that, because I do think that, that's a concern, obviously, of everybody, that if the schools improve, you're going to attract more residents. I agree with you on that. And then we would have to kind of we would have to work with the demographer to understand how do you project for them? And I think a lot of that is going to be historical data from surrounding towns. So they may take into account the South Windsor situation where more students came back. I'm sure, a lot of what you get is the students coming back from the magnet schools.
Yeah,
Exactly. And they go to the magnet schools. Exactly. And the demographers do take that into account. And they could project a serious bump if that were to occur.
I'm sorry. I just have one more question, and then I'll go to talking today. So relative, I want to talk about the process relative to the waiver for the type of the square footage waiver. Will the state require us to have secured some sort of local approval prior to submission of a waiver request? And how long does the waiver request take to be considered?
In order for them to engage and want to, hear your appeal for the space waiver. And again, if the, DAS denies it, again, you have that option of engaging your legislative members to help push that forward.
But through the administrative process, is it, I mean, frankly, we've seen how long school reimbursement takes.
Yes.
Is it that long, or is it like that it might take still be?
No, it wouldn't be a week, and it wouldn't be 7 years. It would be somewhere in between. No, it would, they understand the urgency in getting construction moving. They understand, if a referendum was passed, how to, that's important to the town to understand what their, what the impact of a space waiver could mean to the town. So you would probably get an answer, I would expect that they would request information. It would be back and forth dialogue. And it could take, a couple of weeks, it could take a month.
Okay, it's relatively
It's not years. I wouldn't expect it to be years. And if it started to go down that path, say, let's talk to your legislators and see if we can expedite this.
Thank you for your questions, or your indulgence with my questions. Is there anybody else who has them? Let's start with Noreen.
Back to the square footage requirement that we were talking about, in the elementary school, it's their quotes were a little close to that. And part of that was bringing the fifth graders down to that school. Right now, there is absolutely no place in that building to put a fifth grader. An entire class of fifth graders, there's no space. So when they were coming up with these square footage requirements for the renovate as new, is it based on the design plan? That we would like massive, is it based on what the designers would come up with to accommodate that size? Because I just cannot envision taking space off of Rutland School and moving the fifth grade down there.
Well, based on, right, our presentation, I mean, we're looking, I think it's like 1,700 and 1,800 square feet. I think the state would, acquiesce on something that small. I mean, we're not talking significant amount of space for the elementary school.
Well, and right, because we have pre-K and kindergarten students in that building as well, and, those costs have been increased. And with full day, you can't do it the same way we used to, where it's like a half day program and a half day. I guess I would just have concerns about the numbers on this.
I know the projections, we had conversations, that doesn't include, the space that's occupied. You see, which is a factor, it should be supported, it's actually supported by, endorsed by the state as well. To have such programs.
I'm sorry.
Family Resource Center, so
Oh.
our Family Resource Center program, which is essentially a separate entity that supports both county and school and families. So, great.
Okay, I mean, that would be a conversation with the state to see if they would allow that. And again, if we make an appeal and can make a good argument, I think, the state would listen and accept it. It all depends on how big the ask is, obviously, and they would want to take a look at it as well to understand where we have, what classes you're taking up and how many people that serves, et cetera.
Did the study that is that population, or
It did not.
So pre-K wasn't, it didn't have FRC.
Our pre-K was, but FRC's pre-K.
So that,
Yeah, and again, it's basic, it's just based off the state standards, 2-year square foot area. So there would have to be more analysis to understand what the layout of the building is and what the classrooms look like. So yeah, some of that may not work, and that's another reason to appeal to the state and say, look, we want to do the right thing. Here's our existing facility. As a result, we may not be able to do this, and obviously it makes it look like we're over space standards, but this is the issue. And again, I think they would be somewhat receptive. Again, they may have some questions, and there will be back and forth, but right.
Are you all set?
yes.
I was wondering, if we add back, just for estimation's sake, if we add back the students that we were in 8th grade and then went to either Cheney Tech, I wouldn't say they went to Cheney Tech because they wanted tech. But a lot of the kids that go to magnet schools, but also East Catholic and other of the Catholic schools, when they realize that the rigor of East Windsor High School is good. And if we add those students back, I don't want to make our school too small so that we can't service our own students.
Yeah, I understand. And again, that all comes into play with a demographic study and understanding. And it's not done in a vacuum. It's done, with communication with superintendent and the town, to understand, the possibility of getting, students back. So, they do take that into account.
Gabby, did you have?
Yeah, so just to play devil's advocate, I know you said like for the miscellaneous tickets, that's definitely among the lesser desirable options right now. But if we were to kind of go down that route, kind of along the lines of Jason's question, what is the time frame like in terms of applying for those miscellaneous grants for all of those line items? And like, how much time would we lose in between if those grants were to get rejected?
So a typical timeframe, we have the facility study, we do have to finalize it. But, we could apply, you can apply for what they call a non-priority grant, the first 10 days of each month. So, once we get, enrollment projections, we have to do a grant application, we have to do, educational specifications for each one of the grants that we're going after. For instance, if you wanted to replace the roof, I know on the high school, the roof is in pretty bad shape. We have to put together a grant application, which is enrollment, ed specs, but the ed specs are somewhat truncated because we don't need, an elaborate ed spec to talk about, educational spaces. It's more of a facilities ed spec. It takes a little bit of time. We have to get professional cost estimate and obviously architect on board to do the drawings and so on and so forth. So a roof project from the beginning to having it done, you're applying in December, January. No, actually, you're doing it in October, so that way you can go out to bid in December, January, so that way you have the roofing contractor lined up for the summer. So, you're looking at 9 to 10 months for a roof project. And again, it has to be timed, so that way you get the optimal bid price from a roofing contractor. Windows, for the most part, you can do that pretty much any time of the year. I mean, optimally, you want to do it when the kids are out of school, but we might be able to move things around. So to kind of answer your question, we could do multiple projects at the same time, roof, window, ADA. We can put in one grant application for all of those, or, do them individually. I would say count on 9 to 10 months, let's say, because it's not like a regular school project that has to be in by June 30th. You can submit it before June 30th, but it has to be in by June 30th. State reviews it, they issue what they call the priority list by December 15th. And then your grant commitment letter comes out usually about July, somewhere of the following year. The non-priority projects are a little bit faster. Sure.
Just for the HVAC grant, that's a new grant that the state has implemented within the last year or two. So, last year's HVAC grant they opened on a certain date. I think they opened in August. The first one or the second?
The second one, they opened in August.
Yeah. So the second one opened in August. The applications became available or the grant applications became open for you to apply to in August, and they were due by the end of December. So it kind of, I think next year, if they follow the same process, that's kind of the time frame you have to submit the grant application. Again, you have to do all the legwork to do all the design and things like that ahead of time, so.
I'm sorry. So Joe just reminded me that there would be some abatement items that we would have to take care of. So again, timing comes into play. You like to do the abatement during the summer when the children are out of school, or do it at an April vacation or a Christmas vacation, depending on the nature of the abatement. Window replacements, sometimes they encounter PCBs, and you have to have the students out of the school when you're doing that. Asbestos students can be in the school, but you're very restricted as to what you can do. And a lot of, that's not a, optimal, situation, especially, when, the parents get a little concerned about that. So you tend to try to do the abatement either summer or winter break, April break, things of that nature. So that way, the students aren't in the school when you're doing it. So with that said, that does impact the timeframe and when we do miscellaneous improvements.
Jim, one of the things, we test for PCBs, and we come back positive. That opens up a bigger Pandora's box.
It does.
Has in other schools, in other districts.
You're correct. I'm trying to stay away from that.
So,
Yeah.
test,
Once if you, I'm sorry.
As far as, lease reimbursement goes, the state does reimburse us for the cost, partial cost of reimbursement.
Yeah.
We all know that high school roof absolutely needs to be replaced. We are spending tremendous amounts of money just repairing it here. This is not gonna be a fast process in any way, shape, or form. If we were to go ahead and do that replacement on that high school, take the reimbursement from the state, and then in our process of figuring out what we're doing well, for either school, this school or the high school, if we then were to decide to combine the two schools, do we have to reimburse them for the money they gave us for the roof that we are now not utilizing as a school?
Technically, the way it's written, yes, you would. It would be amortized over a 20-year period. That amortization takes place when the Board of Ed accepts the project as complete. However, if, we might be able to, again, appeal to the state and say, look, we have a bigger plan for these schools. However, the roof is in such bad shape right now at the high school, we need to replace it. They may come back and say, okay, if you're going to use the high school, we can roll that into a renovate as new project. However, if you abandon the high school, you owe us that money back. And it's not writing a check to the state. What it is, let's say we're going to utilize this school for a combination middle high school. They would reduce your grant by that amount.
Well, we would need to, if we were to abandon any building that we took their money for within this 20-year amortization. We do need to pay that.
They would be,
Fair.
that's true.
Jim, for clarification, if we went ahead and did the high school, and we didn't downsize it, we did it the size that it is, what would our reimbursement rate? Because they're saying it's twice as big as.
You're right, your reimbursement rate would be reduced, by the,
22%.
Correct.
The size of that building as it stands, it's gonna say to us, it's big of a building, we're only gonna pay you for 44,000.
They're only gonna
Reimbursed.
They'll only reimburse us for 44,000 square feet.
Right.
And we're gonna be on we're gonna have to pay for the full boat, the remaining 60,000 square feet.
That's correct.
So as soon as we go to the state on anything, these square footage requirements that they have kick in for any kind of project.
That's correct.
All right, thank you, Heather.
I have two questions. One, based on the two options that you have, renovate Broadbrook and either bring the middle school to the high school and middle school. How long would that process take from the shovel on the ground to when, close that stuff? Kind of
We're right side of the building.
no, renovate is no.
But making
And
it
making
to
it
what
current.
size it should be,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
leaving it as it is.
No.
So
So
let's just say we took the middle school and we were going to combine it with the high school, what I would suggest is you move the middle school into the high school, do the renovation to the middle school unoccupied. I would say that would probably take 18 to 24 months. Obviously, you have design time before that, you know, just construction would be roughly 18 to 24 months. But you would have roughly a year, maybe 16 months of grant application and, well, not so much grant application, but the design time, state review, but the construction probably 18 to 24 months, I would say.
And then,
It could, yeah, yeah.
and the, it's with the renovators new, what is it like to just any of us to, will envelope be changing, will, like, what will look like the bare of the building that's used and everything's brand new? How, like, what's the concept?
So. Yeah, so I can't remember what it said for the envelope on the middle school that needs to be upgraded. You know, we would, most likely repoint the masonry and the exterior. Obviously it would be washed. I'm sure, you know, architects would like to enhance the look of the building. So I'm sure there might be some enhancements, architectural enhancements with the building. You know, probably the best thing to do is take a look at JFK Middle School in Enfield, you know, that was renovated as new while occupied. It does look new. You know, there are certain architectural elements that you know, make it look more like a new school. Interior wise, it does look very new. You know, so you know, we basically new floors, new carpet, whatever, you know, new ceilings, new lighting, new HVAC system. So the inside looks brand new. The outside will look refreshed. I'm sure there were, like I said, architectural elements to jazz it up somewhat. So you know, but again, your bones, you know, the exterior, that would all be looked at closely by the architects, and they make an assessment as to what they have to do to get it to that 20-year standard. They would assume, yes, yeah.
So you're studying, reconfiguring.
Yeah, so we did a renovate as new in Norway where they moved into the high school. And we went in there and completely gutted everything, right down to the exterior walls. You know, to literally the brick on the exterior wall. Obviously, it was easy to do that. That took 16 months. It was 3 levels. It was good that they moved the students out because we were able to get in there and quickly renovate the project and do the abatement that was required as well. So, and when you go into the building, everything's brand new. New walls because we took everything out of the inside.
Yes, I'm just trying to, knowing how high school works, where the teachers have their different rooms and kids move between them, and then the same sort of thing happens here where kids, you know, there's a wing and they move from English to math and they go back and forth and around. I just don't see with the footprint, let's just say you did the footprint of the middle school. I am not an architect, but I don't see how you could jam both of those over. I just, to have that space, to have kids move from room to room. And, you know, if they're, I don't know, you talked about a combined auditorium or, you know, separate gyms, I don't know how that would work.
Piggybacking off that, you know, with if this renovate as new option, does that, particularly moving the high school into this building, would that renovate as new also include additional square footage of classroom space to be constructed?
If it needs to be, yeah, you know, obviously, we'd have to take a look at the floor plan, and see how that would work out with classes. You know, obviously, we would be working with, the superintendent to understand the programming of both schools and what's required, and, then
big, but high school should be like 44.8, then
Then-
30, it's not equal 44.8, you know, like you'd have to add for that other 15,000 square, you know.
You actually said that the school, you still need to use 23,000 square feet.
Yeah, and that does not to combine both of them in the school, see, and that just doesn't make sense to me, and I know what we did. So, I mean, people may be aware, we did have the 4th grade up in the, you know, while there was construction at the elementary school. So that, you know, for a period of time, that 1 grade was able to fit in this school. I don't see 3 more grades and other programming fitting into this school the way it
we
is.
could take a close look at it and see how it would work. We're doing rough numbers based off of the space standards worksheet. Obviously, the layout would come into play, and we'd have to work with them.
And lunch with.
Yeah.
Yes.
And again, that would all have to be, flushed out and evaluated. So, yeah, I mean, your high school, your high school enrollment is, what, 260, I mean, it's extremely low.
Is, with all the work that has been happening, is for that to increase and all the people.
Right.
And it's,
And we'd have to take a look at that and see what that increase, would be, would be projected to be. And it may require an increase in square, if we project, you know, what are they, what is it, 275? So if you're going up to 300, 325, obviously we would have to take a look at that and see how that would affect. You know, maybe we would have to do a small addition or something of that nature, you know, into the middle school, or, you know, do you use the high school? You know, that all has to be further evaluated. You know, we're at the very beginning stages here. You know, we just, again, when Samantha started to review the facilities assessment, she had a concern. You know, there's an issue here that we're concerned that the state may not approve these HVAC grants if we have these problems with windows and exterior envelope and roof and so on and so forth. And felt that we needed to kind of take a closer look at options and what that looks like for the town of East Windsor.
just to, like, if you're gonna. They're middle school, those kids need to be separate. You can't, you're not gonna put, I don't want my 5th grader will fall with high school kids. Even my 8th grader,
Right.
I want them apart.
Right. And
Because things happen in high school that it's.
Again, that would all come, you know, to, you know, as we, if that was an option that we move forward with.
Yeah.
That we would have a discussion with the design firm to make sure that that happens. Torrington has a brand new combined middle high school. And I forget how it's laid out, but I think they're separate. You know, they have.
It's connected, but separate from Wallace Middle.
Right.
So.
So those are all things that can be taken into consideration. Like Jim said, we're at the very beginning stages of this process. So if there's, you know, a world in which the town and the district want to go down this road of renovating or building new schools, you know, we would have to develop ed specs, and that would be working with the superintendent, the board of ed, the department heads of each school, and saying, okay, what are your programming requirements? What are your classroom requirements? You know, how many offices do you need and things like that? So all those things will be taken into consideration. It's not like we just throw, you know, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders into a lunchroom with high school students. Like all those things do need to be accounted for. I will say, you know, these are just options that we came up with. There, you could do just elementary school if you want to, you could do just the high school, that these, we're not saying that this is set in stone, that these are just things that we came up with through brainstorming and talking with Joe and Patrick and Jason as well, and things that, you know, could be viable options, but we didn't feel comfortable in letting you guys go through with an HVAC grant if we knew the state would come back and say that that's probably not gonna be a possibility, so.
So, sorry, I had one statement to make in a question. We didn't really talk about parking. I know people had brought up sites concerns with fields and everything combining. It sounds like combining is probably one of the more viable solutions we have. Did you look at the, you know, parking at all as far as like more staff going to, you know, we move all the middle school staff over to the high school? You know, I think we're already kind of congested there for parking and buses and all that kind of stuff. And then really my real question is, so, you know, this is great for conversation purposes. There's not enough information to make a decision, but if we came back to you with, you know, here's 3 options we really want to look at. We like, you know, enough detail to make a decision. What's that cost and what's the time frame? Ballpark,
Design cost, you mean?
like an actual plan, like if we came back and said, here, you know, give us this plan based on these scenarios, like abandoning one school, combining 2, whatever.
If we hired QA&M, obviously to do the facility study, and they have other design requirements, we might be able to convert those to more of a study, like you're talking about, a more in-depth study. You know, I'd have to see what we have remaining on their contract and talk to them about that. You know, it all depends on the firm that you get. We, you know, we do a lot of work in Norwalk. We've done, actually, we had GMPs approved last night for 2 more schools, the high school and another elementary school, after we finished 3 projects prior to that. We always go out for what we call conceptual design and estimate. And the conceptual design takes a look at, you know, you take a look at your current footprint. We tell them what the objectives are, and they would come up with a quick, again, it's not in depth. So, but they would look at, okay, how much space do we have in the existing building? If we need to make an addition, you know, create an addition to accommodate middle school or high school, and also look at the site. What are the, you know, where can we have bus drop off, parent drop off, because we always try to separate those. So we reduce congestion, but also again, parking. Okay, if we're going to add, you know, 75 staff members, we need parking for those 75 staff members, along with the existing staff members of, let's just say, 50 at the middle school. So all that, you know, gets looked at to see what, you know, what we can do for each of the sites, depending on whatever is selected. Those, again, it depends on the architectural firm. I would say probably from $35,000 to $110,000, you know, so, but that's what I've seen when we've requested other studies.
But keep in mind also that we've done very good studies now with QA&M on all the buildings. They have architect, they came through and measured every single square inch of the building. So they know our deficiencies. So we're already at one step, one level. Next, we need, and the whole point of this meeting is, we need direction as the team that wants to go forward. Now, we can go forward with the roof. We can go forward with the HVAC. On their recommendation, we're not gonna get the HVAC, but we can still do the legwork, you know, do all the filing and everything, spend that money. But, you know, these are our experts. These are the people, you know, I mean, we've worked with Jim for quite a few years. He got us out of the modular project, so, but we just, now we're looking for direction. So you come up with 3, 5 different scenarios, that's where we can focus. We can go through and we can, you know, do the surroundings, do the growth, but we really need to stop. Well, I really need to stop them until we have a path.
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
We don't want to spend any more
If we were
money.
gonna say, here's our path we wanna go, I wanna know the time frame and, you know, I guess it's ballpark around.
Yeah.
And then,
cost.
they can get into analyzing and coming into the schools and doing the classroom studies and really narrowing down.
So if, let's just say that you said, okay, CSG move forward with a study on combining the middle and high school at the middle school. I would then, obviously, since we already have QA&M engaged, talk to them about what's remaining on their contract and see if there be any additional costs to do that. What I've done in the past, I would say we would do we would start a conceptual design study in October. By December, we would have a conceptual design, and the conceptual design is just that. It's a floor plan, it's a site plan, it's not in depth, it is subject to change. But we would have an educated guess as to what we can do and to price that and have more accurate pricing based on options that we could do by utilizing the middle school and combining both the high school and middle school. But one of the things, like I said earlier, and that was brought up, is I think the first step would be if we were going to go down the road of one of the options is get a more comprehensive enrollment projection, because that really will dictate as to the size of the school. And again, take into account the possibility of students coming back to East Windsor from magnet schools and technical schools and Catholic schools and so on.
We should do that in a scenario.
We should do that under any scenario.
So that does sound like the first thing.
Say if you're just going to do the roofs and miscellaneous improvements, you don't need to do an in-depth study, because your square foot area is staying the same, and you have more than enough space to grow, significant amount of students based on the square footage of the existing schools. But if you're going to look at one of the options that are presented here, then we would need to do a more in-depth demographic study. Because I do, that is important. And I do want to understand that. Are you getting, will you get more students coming to East Windsor as a result of improved schools? Which I think you would.
They can't get the good education here.
Please remember this, that if we just do windows, roof, okay? We do a renovate as new, soup to nuts, we're talking right down to the furniture, it's done.
Yes.
And we're done for 20 years. More than that, because how long have we been, no disrespect to the high school, but it was the same, and I found out I've been out 40. So,
The schools were built, all these schools were built in the fifties and sixties. And we're already 70 years in on these buildings. And picking up on Heather's question earlier, I have a similar question about what does renovate look like? You answered the question, but we still have 70-year-old foundations, 70-year-old. We're not gonna tear out what they did in Norwalk. I think that'd be probably enormously expensive to tear every internal wall out and rebuild it.
If the building's empty, it may not. No.
We have to support rules. I don't get, but the idea we're gonna end up with a building that in bones, including its foundation, is gonna be 70+ years old by the time it's built. It'll be 75, 80 years old. And then the question is, do we want this to last 20 years? Do we want it to last 40 or 50 years? Parthenon's 4,000. Said earlier, the usual standards have completely changed. Size of classrooms have changed. The ancillary rooms have changed. Size of libraries have changed. Everything has changed. And I think when South Windsor was going through the question years ago, I have to
I was on the Board of Education in South Windsor, was we started the process of asking this exactly the same question we're here tonight. Renovate as new versus build new buildings. They kind of rejected renovate as new because, in large part because the educational specifications and standards have changed so much that when the superintendent says, I want my classrooms to be this large in the kindergarten, this large in first grade, they need to be this large in high school, I mean, this many classrooms. To renovate an old building to those standards, it's gonna be incredibly expensive. And the question is, besides the enrollment, which are really important, for me, the question is first, before you get into combined schools, what's it gonna cost? Versus, because the only reason we're not doing new is because the reimbursement rate is in the 50s and but largely because reimbursement rates are different. I understand that. I think, I don't want to end up with old buildings that are, they say renovate like new.
Right.
I'm not convinced it's renovate like new. I think you have an internal structure that is new with wiring and building walls.
Yep.
But I want this thing to last 50 years, not, we're gonna come back to East Windsor voters in
Well,
20 years and say, hey, we need another $80 million.
right. Good point that we've neglected to state. In order to do renovate as new or to get reimbursement on renovate as new, architect does have to do what they call a study to make sure that just that the foundation, the structure, and it has to be submitted and approved by the state in order to have that renovation to be approved for what they call renovation status. So yes, that has to be done, and that's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, that is something that we do have to address, and we do have to make sure it happens. You know, and in some cases, depending on the condition of the existing building, it's less expensive, even with the reimbursement rate, to do a new school. We have run across that at times. You know, obviously, you know, if it's, we've done renovating as new with 50-year-old buildings, 60-year-old buildings, you know, they were in very good shape. The structure was in very good shape. So we have to take a closer look at the structure. Structural engineers have to come in, do an analysis, and certify, stamp a letter saying, yeah, this could last another 20 years.
So Jim, in your sheet here under, well, in the cost comparison, new construction for 3 new schools, right-sized for square footage, which would be 150,000 square feet less than we have now across the district.
Mhm.
That would be the most expensive option in your projections at almost $68 million. Right on par with renovating the current buildings in their existing footprint, which is just over 67 million. Then everything drops off from the local town obligation by at least $17 million and goes down further there. So it looks like, based from a purely dollars perspective and nothing else, it looks like your renovate, some version of renovate as new would be the most cost effective to the community.
Yeah, as long as, you know,
Everything's scored.
as long as, you know, everything with the structure built is sufficient to last another 20 years. That's the standard.
I just want to comment, you know, a sticker shock, because we're talking $60-something million, but actually, to have new schools, we pay $60 million, probably be, in retrospect, fairly inexpensive. And this community would have to decide if it wants to absorb it. But to renovate like new for $30 million sounds like a lot of money, but I think it's sticker shock. People in other communities have gotten used to the concept of bonding out money, building schools, and paying for it. And, you know, we're just not used to that, talking about like large amounts of money. We have to explain to people, you have to explain to me what's gonna get for it versus the renovate like new versus new. I mean, the residents voters are gonna vote to decide if they want this, and they really need to understand what they're getting at the end of the day. And they may be willing to pay more for a product that may be significantly better, maybe not, than something else. We're just, you know, we're all dealing with the sticker shock.
Can I just, so when you consider new construction, I think the important thing that you need to also consider is where would you put the new building? So is it, do we demo the building that we're in now and build it here? Do we build it on another site? And I think that's a whole other cost that wasn't necessarily factored in here if the town was to acquire or develop a piece of land, that's a whole other additional cost. I think that's why some towns maybe do lean more towards renovate as new, because they just don't have the land space to put a new school. And that adds another caveat to the thing.
And, yeah.
That's true. Sure, that is true, and that's a good point, Samantha. We've done a number of projects where, we've built new schools on the existing site, you know, and obviously, like I said before, you know, you have a lot of acreage on the middle school, for the middle school site. We could investigate how useful that additional acreage is. You could build a new school while this one stays occupied, move in, knock this down. We do that quite a bit. We just finished one in June in Norwalk, where we were about 20 feet away from the existing building. We did one in West Hartford back in 2015. We were 18 feet away from the existing building. And right now, we just last night, Norwalk passed passed a GMP for a brand new high school on the existing site of their current high school to build it on the football field. So it's not out of the ordinary for the to do that. And again, we'd have to take a closer look, you know, at the site, the restrictions of the site, so on and so forth.
Man, it's just like statement. Is that like this is really just an initial meeting, like there is sticker shock. There's a lot to chips. So the process, I know there's certain matrix there that would be required to be posted so people could review it. And that this is really the initial, probably well, most likely is multiple discussions. And I know seasons with Samantha, like there's, I think, 5 different scenarios presented. But I mean, I think in our conversation, you said you could put like 25 or 26, like there's really is no end. And so basically, like based on what, narrow it down, if there's something that wasn't presented and like the community boards are interested in pursuing, like you can put that together as like a proposal that wasn't even shared today. Because basically what's been shared is that there's more. So that really there needs to be an initial discussion. I'm just wondering, does it make sense to allow people to digest it and then like what's next steps? Just
Yeah.
Since
Can we get copies of that? Only if people have copies and, you know.
Great.
Yeah, well, before digesting, issues. I don't like the current structure of any of these based upon age groups. I would like to see if we're gonna do a combination, I would like to see 2 schools. I would like to see the Broadbrook schools have pre-K to 6th grade, and then 7th and 8th grade combined with the high school, keep it a separate. You could eliminate one school, so we could choose what school we don't want, and then if we chose to do brand new, you could then only have 2 schools rather than 3 schools. Brand new. But this school, there's a lot of wasted space. If you go up on the 2nd floor, locker rooms are, the showers, that have been for years, and you look at other things. There could be some things that could be reduced to take one last class here and move that 7th and 8th grade here with the high school. So I'm just going there for thought.
So you're saying the pre-K through 8th grade and then the high school?
No, pre-K through 6th grade, and then 7th to 8th, and then 9th to 12th combined. We can have 2 schools rather than 3 schools. And the renovation cost for both, whether you renovate to new, will be cheaper. And if you chose to keep one and renovate to new and one to build a new school, depending on the foundation stuff, I think it would still be cheaper. But that's just food for thought.
Can I just trying to jump in off of Patrick, I agree with what Patrick's saying, like, we all just found this out tonight, and, we've been hearing rumors about it going on and whatnot, and I think a couple of things, I think the Board of Education side, within working with Patrick and the administrative staff, we need to have a conversation about our strategic plan and our vision going forward and the things we've been working on, to try to grasp into. Because we have plans and we have visions, but it's never really been building based. Now we need to start throwing in building based. But I also think that it's very important that the town be a very big part of this, because first of all, it's taxpayer money, and secondly, there may be buildings that can be utilized for other things. And so it is sticker shock, and we do have a lot to absorb. My concern, just from the historical picture of these winters, is we kind of do these things and go into that mode of, okay, we need to absorb it, we need to think about it, we need to do it. And 3 years later, we're still needing to absorb it. So personally, and, your board can talk about it, and our board can talk about it, is to come up with a plan for this to be a purposefully moving situation in one, in some way, because, and also the cost, if this takes an extended amount of time, are only going to increase. Nothing's coming down in price. There's a very real possibility that the state of Connecticut will change their reimbursement rates over the course of the next 5 years, and then we're in a whole different thing. So my concern to everybody here is that we don't let this be okay, that was horrible, and awful, my God, it's horrible. Embrace it and start moving toward.
Sooner rather.
So in the spirit of continuing to move things forward, I guess I'll throw this out to the Board of Selectmen and then you guys as well, but I would be very comfortable, and I'd ask the group the same, authorizing CSG to move forward with that more precise demographic study to see if they can project out what, or I don't know, a demographer, projecting out what that enrollment might look like if these things are moving forward. I think that piece of information would be helpful as we delineate things. Do you four have any objections to that?
We have a cost.
Is that part of our contract?
It's not.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, how much would it?
We pulled back on all the engineering, so the money you all gave us for the engineering and stuff, we can dip into that for now. Cover what you want to do, and then what we'll do is, when we start the engineering, it's gonna all change. I mean, we were engineering for 3 HVAC systems, 2 roofs, and so we'll be fine.
I mean, I don't want to slow the process down, but I would feel more comfortable knowing the dollar amount and knowing exactly what I'm supporting.
Yeah, and in all, transparency, we are also talking about starting a facilities committee. We were just waiting for this report to come out. So I think a little more discussion on the board of ed side too. I mean, I do agree that we would need the demographic study in any case, but if it's, as Sarah said, if it's a money situation and if we have to vote, I think that was on the agenda for tonight.
Wouldn't be, I put it on the board agenda for Thursday.
For Thursday.
But we could get them started on a proposal for us to consider for Thursday, what my thought process was.
Yeah.
To know. Or splitting the schools or combining whatever it is we're doing. I think you're right on that this needs to be looked at a little more seriously.
I have one question. So if we go back a minute to, what Ms. Giago had said, so if we send $68 million to build new river, how many years? Because you keep going back to 20 years, and I don't want to spend $68 million. These buildings.
So say, when you're doing a renovate as new, the state says you have to bring it to a 20-year standard. That's why we call it a 20-year. Most of the time they last beyond that, but you have to bring it to a state standard of a 20-year lifespan. Because your rooftop, you know, your HVAC equipment isn't gonna last 20 years, but your structure, your building is gonna last 20 years, but. You know,
But some of
they,
the experience. They started.
correct, right.
So I was like, saying
Yeah,
it.
and the reason, again, the 20-year, when I say 20-year, it's state lingo that you have to bring it to a 20-year standard.
Jason, on the issue of next steps, no, I don't have a problem moving to start the demographic study or do it, but I think I would maybe say, send it back to the superintendent, have him meet with the staff, have him make a recommendation to the Board of Education that they endorse as to what the superintendent would like to have that study look like. And then forward what the superintendent with the Board of Education wants it to look like back to this group to go to demographics, because I think that the scope of the demographic study, all of the details should start at the superintendent's office. Right? That's why we could I take it 2 steps rather than just one, say, let's go pay for a study and have it done. I like to see the superintendent be the driver of that ship if he's willing to do it.
I agree with you.
Yeah, in theory.
So, hold on one second, I agree with that, and then we'll.
I think any such study by anybody, sure, because people coming in, we're talking about people coming back into town. If we renovate the charter schools and prep schools and all those back in town. But I don't think people are gonna make a decision until they know exactly what we're doing forward. It makes the difference if you have three schools versus 2 schools, makes a difference what the age groups that are gonna be inside the school. I don't think doing a study right now until it's being determined. That's just me.
Just to add, I mean, I know, and I appreciate certainly, my feedback, staff feedback, I think that important stakeholder to that, is the feedback as parents as well. Because certainly their kids and trusting us to educate them. Certainly they need to be we need to find a way to ensure that we have their.
My concern is, we can decide about the study or not the study, however, I don't disagree that it should come to and have a conversation about it. We don't have money for it. And there is that will into this project to get this engineering study done and get all of this. And so if it is part of the project that we did this for, then it should be coming out of those funds. Sure, what a demographic study costs, but if it's even $25,000, the money is in that CNR, that should be paying for it. We don't have dollars paid for any.
So what I'll have Jim do is go back and send me an updated proposal of cost to do the demographic. So that way then you guys will know how much it costs. And, fair enough on my end and their end is then you guys can all decide what road you're gonna point us down, and then we'll start.
So not only what it would cost, but as you said, if there's money left in this engineering account, like what is available that could go towards that, if is that what you mean in terms of?
Yeah. It's study of the schools, that was the whole premise of what we were doing here. And
But that's what I mean, how much it would cost to do this study, but then how much money we have
well,
if you're saying we didn't spend money for the roof engineering. Yeah.
right, well, we've spent money, we've had engineers in here spending, how many hours were they in here, Patrick? They were here almost 2 weeks.
No, that's what I'm saying. I understand that you spent a part of it, but I guess what I'm saying is I don't know how much is left.
If
So
we were to
can
move
have-
forward with any type of a study, the school district wouldn't be obligated to cover it. The town side already has the money for that. That's what your question is.
Guess all I would say to all that is, sounds like the beginning of, let's talk about it for 6 months.
Get the ball rolling with some data point where we can hone in on this kind of discussion, but I'm not gonna.
What, we have a meeting on Wednesday, and one of our agenda items is that, so we'll discuss it.
Suggest, make sure it's on.
So, and then you just said you have a meeting on Thursday. So
But we need to vote on an amended agreement and move forward.
So the demographics can't be paid for until,
It's an amendment to the contract.
I mean, it's great. You guys are gonna have your meeting and it'll be on our next meeting after that. I guess that's great. I wouldn't want to go for it. It's lost in the dust.
Because I'm the impatient person in the room.
Can I just ask one other? Logistical question. So we figured this out and we move forward. As I'm not sure if we mentioned it earlier, we now have a, facility subcommittee on the Board of Education. Would it be a logical thing to do to have that committee be meeting with a set of people from the town side on an ongoing basis to make sure that we're all working conjunctively together and going forward?
I think that's appropriate.
Just because we already have one assigned, so us just kicking it off, but if you guys need to, come up with something on your side so that we can just start scheduling meetings and whatnot. Just the thought. One last question, can we get copies of
I forwarded to Patrick.
Oh, I'll send it out to your side again.
The only other email I have is Heather, but
Patrick, you'll send it to the board of selectmen too?
thank you. Anything else on your side, Jake?
Inside. Seeing no further business to come before the joint meeting, I'd ask for a motion from the Board of Selectmen to adjourn.
7:50.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. It's non-debatable. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed? We're adjourned at 7:54 PM.
Needs a motion, second. All in favor of.
Great.